Welcome back, everybody, to the Booked Solid podcast. This is Stephanie Mack, and I'm here with Hannah Caitlin Parker. We are here today with a very special episode with just the two of us, and we are going to do a Q&A. We popped up a question box and put up a post on our main grid asking you guys to ask us anything, and you guys brought it. We are excited to dive in. You asked some really compelling questions that made us stop to think. Some of them are bookish, some of them are writerly, a little bit of faith, a little bit of family, and we're excited to do this. It's fun to just kind of talk from our personal reading lives, personal home lives, and we're excited.
Yes, talk about everything, and the questions are just so fun and different. So I'm excited to dive in. I tried to keep from answering any of them on social media until we could do the little episode. So
I know it's hard when we see the questions that are so good and we have so much to say and we're like, okay, let's save it for a joint podcast episode.
Yes.
So we will just go ahead and dive right in, and also just thank you guys for all the engagement lately. We love your questions. We love it when you share our episodes. We love when you comment. It seems to be just increasing as we continue to grow the podcast. So just know it means so much to us when you communicate with us. We love you guys.
Yes.
So here we go. Question number 1. Hannah, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll answer second. What is a goal for each of you with your author careers for next year? And what is a goal you have for the podcast for next year? Such good questions. So start with over the next year. So I guess figure kind of like 2025, right? For author
my
career
brain, when I think next, like I feel like I'm already in 2025 because I'm so focused mentally for reasons on 2026. And so I think for 2025 is just to get the book done, is to finish the book, get through the edits. 2025 will be the year that I am really in the thick of it as far as getting this debut novel out. And so all the things will be happening all of 2025 to gear up for 2026. And so I think really just focusing on that and also learning my process. I think that's the biggest thing and biggest goal for me for 2025 as an author and as a new author is learning what my process looks like. You know, you get on social media and there's so many voices telling you how to write a book. Don't use Google Docs, use Scrivener, don't use Scrivener, use Atticus and go on a writing retreat or stay home and write. You know, there's just so many different ways to write a book. And so I think just canceling out all the noise and figuring out what works for me while kind of also leaning into all these different strategies and looking at, okay, I can try this and see if it works or try this and see if it works, but really just figuring out what works for me as a wife and a mom, a homeschooling mom, and just kind of integrating this new career into my schedule.
I love that.
But that was
so good.
True. And I know it's not really like to hit the bestseller list or whatever, but 2025 won't have a book yet. So it's really just birthing that book, baby. That's a lot what it feels like. I used to
have a pregnancy. It's a pregnancy with the book year. I totally feel that.
When people would say that, but now I understand.
I literally have 3 children and it's not dissimilar. I'm like, it's like very similar. It's like you birth this thing and then you release it into the world and let go. It's very.
And hope and pray it does well.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
So I love that. And I think
author goal.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we talk to so many authors on the podcast in daily life that share their methods, and it's a blessing to have all that information. And what I take from that is there's no right or wrong way. I love taking all the information from people and then seeing what works. Some people write their books on their phone, some people use dictation, some people plot, some people don't. And it's just, I love that, finding that process that works for you over time. And what about the podcast for you?
I would love just to continue to grow. Like, I think we have gained some traction in the last few months, and as we dove into season 2, I think season 2 kind of, I won't say exploded, but we've gotten more feedback, we've got more engagement, we've gotten more requests to be on the podcast since launching season 2. And so I think just kind of snowballing off of that, and really the fact that publishers and market editing people, whatever you want to call them, I just drew a blank. They're publicists. That's the word I'm looking for.
That's the word, yeah.
That publicists are reaching out to us from these major publishing houses is just wild. I love it. Every time one of those emails hits our inbox, it is just like, oh my gosh. So even though the numbers don't always feel huge and explosive, it's like we're looking at a different goal than your traditional podcast. Yeah. And to me, that's just golden, the connection. So I think just to continue making those connections is my biggest goal. That. Yeah.
So good. I love all of that.
Yeah. So what about you? We're going to turn the tables.
Yeah. Well, I will start with podcasts since we're talking about it. And I just echo all of that for 2025 in the podcast. I think it's crazy because it started early this year, 2024, January, February. And it all has happened so quickly that if I really pause and I'm like, we are about to talk to Robin Jones-Gunn, my literal childhood idol. And we talked to Martha Hall Kelly and we talked to Katherine Center. Like, I haven't even fully processed all of that yet. And I'm just so honored that people say yes to us. You guys are listening. It's incredible. Yeah. And what I have learned from my author journey, I'm 5 years deep, just signed with an agent at age 38. I'm all about the long game. So I think it's not like we started and got 1 million listens the first month or anything close to that. But I think we're building something really beautiful and special. And you guys who listen, you just like feel like friends and sisters. And like that is what matters. And I really believe in the long game and a strong foundation. And I can't imagine a stronger one. So I think continuing to build off that. And just a couple little things that I shared in our kickoff to the season episode is I really want to get a guy on here. I really want to get someone in film. And just Hannah and I have been talking a lot about delivering and preparing episodes for you guys that are really drilled down and specific and themed rather than just like we said. We kind of started off new and I love all of those episodes and I think it's cool. They'll stand forever. Like we always have all these author stories, but we want to go deeper with these amazing authors into their expertise. So growth and tailored episodes and just a fun few kind of bucket list guest types for me. And then career goals, like Hannah, I will not have a book in 2025. So it's an interesting place and makes me so thankful we have the podcast and each other and a strong writing community. I really am thankful for the podcast because it just gives, it's a different part of our brains. It's talking to friends, makes it all feel less lonely. But I would say I'm minutes literally away from going on submission with my third novel. So I think in a year, I would love to have an editor partner that feels as meant to be as my agent does, as Hannah does, just that moment where you're like, God knew all along this is divine. I really pray for that editor partner. I hope in a year the book will be like on its way. I'll have a pub date. I'll maybe have a cover just for that book that's about to be submitted to find her home. And then I hope I will have written my next book. I write quickly. And I usually take 3 to 6 months to kind of outline, ruminate, plot, and research. And then I'll draft in the spring. So I hope I have another book written. I have to figure out what the book is going to be also. So yeah, I think... I know. I've got to it's fun to have an agent who brainstorms with you because on our last call, this is just a fun behind the scenes moment or how my agent works is I sent her 5 concepts and we talked through them. And that was so fun because I've never had that. And she just got to say, I see this for you. I don't see this for you. And I'm like, so
and don't you love it when you have this idea or multiple ideas and you bring them to the table and then they're like, that doesn't really fit you. And you're like,
100%. No, I had this one idea.
Step away.
Right?
It didn't really.
I know. I had this one idea I've had for 2 or 3 years. And my agent was like, I love it, but not yet. You need to table that. And these are the reasons you can't write that book. And I'm like, I receive it. You know better than me. Yeah. So yeah, I really am thankful because it just makes it feel like I have a business partner. So yeah, those are my goals. So thank y'all for hanging in there with me and Hannah, as we don't have books next year, but we will share everything we can still about the journey.
Yeah. And that is one thing that I feel like it just isn't talked about enough and people aren't aware of enough. It's like we talked about before, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Mm-hmm. And everybody's timeline looks differently, and it can get discouraging sometimes when you're querying and when you're writing or thinking about querying, or you've already got your agent when you're looking around it, especially with these indie authors that are getting traditional deals. And it's just like, bam, we're re-releasing your books. You've already got a new one ready and things like that. But I think it's just important for our listeners that are aspiring authors or even toying with the idea, that you remember that everybody's timeline is different and that everybody's journey to publishing is wildly different. I mean, my story and Stephanie's story are on two different ends of the spectrum. My story and anybody else's story is just, everybody's different. And so I think keeping that in mind, and I'm reminding myself as much as I'm reminding you guys, is just keeping that in mind. And social media can get so loud, and so
it can get so loud.
Take a step back. That's something that I have been doing in the last little while, is because I'm like, I can't get on here and see this, fall into this comparison trap and let that be the thief of the joy of the journey. Because even though there's ups and downs and there's roller coasters, it is, like you said, it's all God designed. And so just my little tidbit.
I love that. I love it so much. And I think too, like I'm coming out of being indie and going traditional. And I think there's also just those two camps that are both thriving in their own way right now. And both can compare to the other in such big ways, and it's like, if you're indie, you're like, oh, you have a team and a partner and all that's true. But we can look at indie and be like, you could release 4 books in between now and when we finally get a book. So it's just, they're different things. So I love all of that. Well, let's move on to the next question. Reading related. What book do you each hope to read before the end of the year? And what's an anticipated read for 2025?
Oh, I was telling Stephanie before we hopped on that when people ask those kind of questions, my mind as to what is on my bookshelf pretty much goes blank. When I'm making a post about it, I'm like, oh, I'm good with all this information, but goodness gracious. I would say Frozen River for sure, because it is our winter book club pick and I have not started it yet. And in case you did not know, I am a very slow reader. So, I would say I need to start that pretty soon, so I can finish it before January.
Yeah.
But another one that has been on my radar, and I've been checking the library for it every time because I'm trying to get more books from the library because I have entirely too many on my shelf that I haven't read yet. And so it is Remarkably Bright Creatures, because I have not read it yet. And
I have it. I'll send it to you.
I feel like everything I see about it is that it's like one of those once in a lifetime books. I don't know why I feel that way. I was trying to explain it to my sister the other day and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's about an octopus.
100%.
But I haven't read the synopsis. I'm going into it blind because anytime I see a review about it on social media, I'm like, don't want to see it because I want to just experience that book. And I told my sister the other day, she was like, what? I haven't heard of that one. I was like, I really think from social media that it is like one of those like once in a generation books, like, so that is on my list and I shall get it read at some point.
You shall get it. Well, I have it. I know what Hannah's getting for Christmas from me. I literally love that book, and it's one of those books that mystifies you because you're just like, how did I fall in love with an octopus and this sweet friendship between a human and an animal at her workplace? It's really, and as a writer, you're like, how did you pull that off? How did you dazzle us all?
That's what's drawing me to it the most right now, because I'm reading multiple books at once, what I never said I would never do, but Stephanie ruined me.
I've corrupted her.
But a lot of the books I'm reading right now, I'm like highlighting and making notes in them of like, okay, this is this character's arc peeking through. You know, I'm dissecting them. And so I'm just really eager to see how the author pulls that one
I
off.
know. It's so fun. It's so fun. And what about 2025? Is there anything on your radar?
Yes.
Or author. You can go author.
2025, Katherine Center's new rom-com will come out in May of 2025, and it is called The Love Haters. And with how I fell in love with her book, The Rom-Commers, I feel like this one is going to be very much that same vibe. And so I am just excited for that one. But also Martha's Vineyard Beach and Book Club by Martha Hall Kelly comes out around the same time, I believe. And I am so excited for that one. So excited. So those are my 2025 picks. Two big ones. But I'm excited. So
those are
what about
fantastic.
You?
I would say by the end of the year, I also want to finish Frozen River. I started it, and then, gosh, it starts out with a bang, and I'm obsessed. But I actually have found I'm in an in-person book club, and we do interviews on the podcast. And truthfully, if I read a book too early, prior to the conversation at hand, it's not as fresh. And I wanted it to feel fresh. As soon as my jaw fell on the floor and I realized we were interviewing the author, Ariel Lawhon, I was like, I want to like push it a little closer.
That's been me, but I always push it and then I don't finish it before.
Oh yeah, and that's the struggle too, because sometimes I overestimate. I know. It's like I overestimate my ability to crunch and procrastinate. And I forget that now I have 3 children and a household and like all of these things. I'm like, I can't always read a book in a day. Sometimes I can, but that's the struggle. But yeah, I think since we read so many books for the podcast, that has been something new this year that I'm sort of like trying to fit into my reading for pleasure, which I genuinely will never stop doing. Yeah, all of that. But it was like literally the start of Frozen River is like gripping, but I was like, I'm gonna just like take a second. So Frozen River. And then my other one that I just started the audio, you guys, Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz of One Tree Hill. I am a One Tree Hill girly. I literally have watched the whole thing through twice, and I kind of want to do it again. Haley James Scott. I've always known that she was a Christian, and I've loved that about her. This book is about her experience in a Christian gone wrong cult, and I cannot.
I've been seeing that on social media.
And I just started the audio very beginning, and she's such a performer. The voices, the accents, like I cannot stop. And so that's going to be my current audio, and I can't wait to finish, and I will keep you guys posted. And I'm curious to see what it was like. Like, it's so fascinating. It was like reading Matthew Perry's memoir, and you're like, you were an addict and hurting the entire time you were making us laugh in Friends. Like, that just broke my heart. And this Haley James Scott, she was brokenhearted in this abusive cult the whole time she was on One Tree Hill. I know that's going to make me want to rewatch the show. And it's just, I love her. I also want to know where she is with God now. I always wonder when people walk through something like that.
With her. Because there's been a lot of buzz, and I have to admit, I've never watched a single episode of One Tree Hill.
So good. I'm like, that's a moment where like, no, I know. You guys, we have these moments where it's like Stephanie's 10 years older than Hannah. I'm like, are you, you're a millennial, right? Yeah. But like, you're like the baby millennial. And just turned 28. And so I'm like, we're like straddling the millennial gen here, guys. But before your time. Yeah. But what did she say in the interview? What did she talk about her faith now at all?
She is still a Christian. Because I remember them, like, I was watching some interviews and I didn't even know who she was. I was like, who is this person? I just know she's talking about a cult, and cults catch my attention. But I want to say she was still, she was talking about like her faith, her walk with God, and how it kind of molded, you know, how she went through all that. So I want to say she still is. I may be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
No, I love when a celebrity memoir just talks openly about God out of the gate. Jessica Simpson's was that way too, and Bethany's is that way.
But it's also like a weird place to be when you read their memoirs or you watch like these documentaries, because you go back and watch the show and that's like all you can see is like you're 100%. Trying to pick up on like their pain, I guess, through like we watched the Nickelodeon documentary about all the like child stars and things like that. And then my husband and I went back and watched episodes of like Drake and Josh, and we were like, you could almost see Drake Bell's like pain on those episodes, and you were like, oh, now I can't watch this and be happy because you know what was going on behind the scenes. So
I did the same thing, tricky. And that's a plug
They're
for
like
a really
so binge-worthy memoirs are, but then also it's like, darn, you shattered my whole.
I know. Another one. I'm glad my mom died by Jeanette McCurdy. I had never heard of her, and I, an adult woman, went back and watched the. Yeah, did you watch that?
Sitcom I grew up with. Oh yeah.
Okay. I see another one.
Yeah.
I went back and watched it and was like seeing it. I'm like, this is so sad. Yeah, but that's another amazing book.
It was so good. Like I hate to say it was so good, but her writing, like her witty, dry, funny, like it was good. Yes. So.
And she wrote it herself, no ghostwriter. She's a real writer. But I appreciated that. Yeah. So those are my two for by the end of the year. And then for 2025, I really have my eye on a book by one of my all-time favorite thriller writers, Alice Feeney. The book Beautiful Ugly comes out January 14th, 2025. I love Alice Feeney so much.
I do too.
So that, oh my gosh, she's just twisty and diabolical.
One of my first, like, thriller authors. I love it.
Yeah, she's
Daisy
just,
Darker.
Just so good. And then, I think too, just like I love now that I have a solid lineup of auto-buy authors, and I'm like, yes, I want everyone's. I want Katherine Center's, I want Martha Hall Kelly's, I want Melissa Ferguson's. It's really fun. So and
that's another one I am excited about is Melissa Ferguson's new one, but I have it. We have the arcs, but I keep reaching for it, and then I'm like, no, you have to wait till closer to time.
I know. I did the same thing
again for that book, and I keep reaching for it, but I'm like, I'm not really a rereader, unless it's like just wild. And so I'm like, wait till January or February.
I know.
Read it.
I know. It's taking willpower, but I'm the same. And that'll be really special because it'll kind of be right around our 1-year anniversary of the podcast. And she was our first guest, and her publicists reach out to us to
feel like
get her back on.
We're just having a moment. And I talked about this a little bit on my Instagram, and you guys responded so well, but I was like, is it going to die out? Is it a timeless like trope, or what are we looking at here? Because there just seems like they're exploding right now. Emily Henry's new one is going to be Bookish, and then Melissa Ferguson's newest one. So I'm curious to see how it plays out from an author who loves a bookish book's perspective.
Totally. I know. I'm curious too. And then even Alice Feeney's new one, the male protagonist is an author. So I always love even a thriller when there's like an author character. But specifically, you're right, in sort of the rom-com fun space, there have been a lot of bookish books. Even Katherine Center's rom-comers was screenwriting. So it's kind of that writing industry. So I know. Well, those are some fun books to watch from us. Yes. And next, you guys wanted some recs from me and Hannah in each genre. So we'll just kind of share what we have. Maybe more will come from Hannah in certain genres, more from me, but we can just run through them.
Yes.
Let's start with thriller.
Okay.
Hannah, you're newer to thrillers / I'm like thriller junkie, but do you have any thrillers that you recommend?
Every time I get asked this question, I say the same thing. It's Bronswood by Marissa Vanskike. I may be saying her last name wrong. I need to ask her. But anyways, it's so good. It's an indie thriller, and she is phenomenal. I read her first one, which was How It Had to Be. That one was great, but her writing between her debut novel, and Bronswood exploded. Like, and I've said this to her, we're friends and we chat back and forth about bookish things and writing, and I have voiced this to her many, many times, is her writing just like, oh my gosh, just like it just exploded. And so to see the growth, number one, was super fun. But Bronswood is like so twisted. It's so good. It's so good. It's about an elite elementary school and a child goes missing. I'm not going to give too much away, but the mom goes to the school and like realizes her child's missing, and they're telling her that she already came and picked him up that day. And she's like, no, and they have it on tape and all this stuff. And there is just so much going on behind the scenes, but the mom is like determined. And so it gives off like those movies. I'm drawing a blank on those, what movies is, but like Taken almost, where you've got like this primal parent instinct where they're like, no, I know something's wrong. And this mom is just going after it. It's so good. It's so good.
Oh my goodness. I need to finally just read that. Bronswood.
And she has a new one coming out soonish, I think. And she is so good about like her process as far as, because she shares a lot of writing on social media, but like she is smart because she won't like give you a title. She won't give you a release date until she is like, this book is done. This book is perfect. And I love and respect that for her. And I think this last one, I may be wrong, but from watching her social media, she's kind of extended her timeline out as she's come up with different things. And I just love and respect that so much. But anyways, thriller Bronswood is probably at the top of my list for a recommendation, other than, your Frida McFadden's and things like that.
Oh, totally.
Yes,
can't go wrong with Frida. I know. I gushed about Frida so much on a recent episode that I was like, you're not going to talk about Frida today. But there I go, talking about Frida. She's so good. Yes. But I am just going to tail off of my earlier Alice Feeney recommendations. Yes. She's just one of my favorites, and one that I recommend over and over and over again because it's so twisty is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. It's like this it's phenomenal. I'm not even going to say anything about it. Yeah. Just look it up. His and Hers. Yeah. My mom recently read it and she was like texting me the whole time she was reading, and she's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, did you see it coming? And she's like, no. Like, it's so good. So His and Hers.
Yeah.
No.
I have a hard time with thrillers because always like everybody was like, I kept being like on social media, I would like prompt in my stories and be like, I need a thriller that I don't know the end. Like I cannot figure it out. And everybody was like, read The Silent Patient. Read The Silent Patient. I pegged it in the first chapter. I was like,
It's so funny. Like, for you call it always. And for how many thrillers I read, I am very gullible still. Like, I still am pretty easy to fool. Yeah. But
I will say, though, I am that person that, and my family hates me for it, but I've done this since I was little, is I will read the last chapter of the book before I ever start the book. And I'm like, okay, if the last chapter has me hooked, then I'll read the rest of the book. But I don't do that with thrillers just because I'm like,
yeah.
And I love, it's probably just a writer brain, but I love reading, knowing what's coming and watching how it builds up to that. And I didn't understand why I did that as a teenager and young reader, but now I know, like, because I love the breakdown of books. But with thrillers, I don't do that because I'm like, okay, I want to read those for like pleasure. Like, I don't want to dissect them. So I try not to do that with this.
I know.
But I still figure it out, and then I get mad. So
I know. Well, read His and Hers and tell me if you call it.
I will.
And then a really just rapid fire shout out for an author named Jennifer Hillier. She's one of my favorites. Little Secrets is a phenomenal kidnapping story. Oh my gosh, I love that book. And then Jar of Hearts, very, very, very dark, guys. It is phenomenal, chills up and down. But I remember specifically in Jar of Hearts, there's like a beginning portion in a prison that's like really R-rated, but the whole book doesn't carry on that way. FYI, Jar of Hearts, 5 or 6 stars, so good. So those are my thrillers. Check them out, guys. Those are some thriller faves for me and Hannah. Okay, next, historical fiction. You go first.
Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly is
amen.
Phenomenal. That is one book. I know I said earlier that I don't reread, but that is one book. I think I've read it 3 or 4 times just because it is so layered. The storytelling is just phenomenal. And if you are a World War II concentration camp junkie, that book delivers. Like, it's just it's her writing in that book. And to think it was her debut is just... Now I want to go reread it again with that in mind, because when I read it the first time, I really thought, like, okay, this is a seasoned author. I didn't know much about her. And to hear that is her debut, I'm like,
seriously.
Wild.
And knowing that she basically did a full rewrite that took a year, like, makes me have a new appreciation of her commitment to get it to where it ended up. I'm like, and she's just... before we started recording today, we were chit-chatting, and I was like, that Martha Hall Kelly episode was just all-time writerly moment for me. So good. That's such a good one. Well, I was going to say The Women, but there I go saying it anyway. The Women, Kristin Hannah. It's a book of the year. Read it if you haven't. But I'm going to go with one that was a couple years ago. Actually, it might have been 2021, Yellow Wife. Yellow Wife is one of the most powerful historical fiction books I have ever read. It's about a woman in the Civil War era. You just have to read it. And we did it for our book club, and everyone gave it, I think, 5 stars. And we had so much powerful discussion. And I remember I was finishing it when I was on a flight, coincidentally, to the South, to Charleston, with my college best friends. And I was just weeping on the plane because it was something about knowing I was traveling to this place where this occurred just really got me. And that's like a moment I remember where I was. And then a couple weeks later, we had our book club discussion. So Yellow Wife, all time. Check it out. Okay. Romance, Hannah.
Okay. I'm going to say the rom-commers. Not cliche, but the rom-commers, Katherine Center. That was my first Katherine Center novel. And it just really opened my eyes to the rom-com genre having some depth. And for me, that was really game-changing, because I was really kind of at a place where I was like, I don't even know if I like rom-com books, just because I've heavily read historical fiction before, women's contemporary, things like that. And so that just kind of opened my eyes that there can kind of be a blend between women's contemporary and rom-com, that classic rom-com, I guess, feeling. So rom-commers for sure. It's pretty hilarious, and I think I cried at the end too. So win-win.
It's amazing. I love that you said that, because we did not talk about this answer prior, and what I wrote down for romance was How to Walk Away, which was my first Katherine Center book that I read in 2018. People might say that's not really a romance, but it totally is, especially the ending. There's this like big grand gesture, but it was very eye-opening to me as a reader and writer, because it's so deep and rips your heart out, but it's totally like a romance in the fact that this girl who gets in a plane crash kind of falls in love with her physical therapist. So yes, it's a romance, but the depth, I just had never read anything like it. And since I've read every single Katherine Center book published since then, I'm still working on a backlist. It's so good. So I wrote How to Walk Away just because it was a book
posted that one on my stories, because I got it with the like Prime Day sale a few weeks ago. I posted it on my stories, and the amount of people that messaged me and were like, you haven't read this book. And I was like, no, not yet. And but the people, I mean, I literally got so many messages that day that were just like, that is my favorite Katherine Center book. Like, that book is it. So
I know.
I can't wait to read it. One of my goals for 2025 is to read all the books on my bookshelf that haven't been read yet.
I know. That's my I'm gonna call it a lifetime goal.
Life goal,
crazy, but I know I love too how Katherine Center was just so funny and self-deprecating about how everybody thought that was her debut, and it was not. It was like her 6th book, and she's like, that's a book popped, and it was my 6th book. So we're big Katherine Center fans over here. We'll try to get her on again for her next book. All right, last category, Christian fiction. What do you think?
I am going to have to say the Angels Walking series back here in Kingsbury. Just because that was the very first Christian fiction book I had ever read. And it was just given to me coincidentally, that's the word I was looking for, by a baseball mom of a baseball player that our family was really good friends with, and our lives were really revolved around baseball at that time. And she was reading it, and she gave it to me just at a season in my life where I was really going through a whole lot of stuff. But she gave me that book, and I was in a season where I hadn't read in a really long time either. And I read that book, and that's kind of what just catapulted me back into reading and reminded me like that story gets us through seasons and things like that, the comfort of books. But I just forever love how she wove that story. I love how she seamlessly incorporated the angels into the, gave them flesh and made them real. I loved those books. So that just because they, like I said, they were really came to me at the right time, but also they kind of catapulted my love for storytelling and things like that. And then also introduced me to Christian fiction, because up until that point, I was reading like Sarah Dessen and all your fantasy books. I didn't really know Christian fiction was a genre until then. And so after that, my mom and I devoured every Christian fiction book we could get our hands on. And so that one for me for sure. But if anything, just the way she told those stories, to me, that's her best work in my opinion.
I love it.
So
so good. Well, I have a twofold answer. First, I feel like this might be cheating because this book doesn't actually have like a Christian through line, but she is such a wonderful Christian girl, woman friend, Bethany Turner.
Yes.
Cole and Layla are just friends. Just so amazing. And I love that book because you feel Bethany's just like heartbeat and solid personality and wit and humor, and like she's a Christian, but the book isn't like faith-filled with content, but it's just one of the most fantastic rom-coms I've read in a long time. Just it's set in New York, it's like friends to lovers, and I just love that book. So
good.
Bethany, we love you. I can't wait for the third in the series. And my second one, I shared in our kickoff episode ever of Book Solid, but I have a little more to say about it, and that is Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers.
Of course,
because when I shared that, right? When I you're like, I know. Like,
I was trying to think of my answer, and I was like, do I say Francine Rivers? Because that's everybody's answer, but it is true.
I know.
And I think that's just a testament to her storytelling. I mean, it's just so good.
It is. And I think had I known when I said that I would now share an agent with her, and I have had conversations with Francine, which I can't even believe. I have a different perspective of her because I've heard a lot of behind the scenes things about her and her career that I can't share publicly. But what I will say, what I've noticed since signing with Danielle, I've paid more attention. And Francine is a queen, yes, but she also has been brave, and she's taken a lot of heat for quote unquote going there with the grit and sexuality and honesty of her stories, and the way Danielle has her back. And Francine is a queen no matter what, but she's a queen. I belong to this Facebook group called Book Reviews for Christian Families, and I'm quite honestly like, I just roll my eyes, but people really have an issue with how sexual Redeeming Love is, and I'm like, wow, no, bravo. So I think I am so honored. read the Bible. I'm honored to share her agent. I'm honored at what I've heard of like her character. And also like I identify with her a lot because my first book talked a lot about sex and pornography and things. And I had some of those Christians be like, waving their finger and clutching their pearls at me. And so I'm like, Francine, thank you for paving the way for us, you know, like, thank you for going there and showing us that Christians are real. Life is hard. And I just even more so have all the respect in the world for her. So if you haven't read that book, like it's time. So it's Francine and Bethany Turner, we love you. And Angels Walking. Those are some tricks for you guys. All right. Just a couple more questions for you guys. Next, you guys wanted to know some of our favorite podcasts, specifically bookish, whether that's reading or writing. Podcasts that we love, respect, recommend. Do you have any, Anna?
I am loving the Lit Ladies. They are a new podcast.
Yes,
I have been listening to their episodes, and they are doing such a phenomenal job at what we're trying to do. They are really honed in on topics. Now, I don't believe they have guests yet. They only have 3 episodes out so far, but they have just discussed I'm trying to look at their page now. One of their episodes was just about Christian fiction and kind of where they see it going and the state of Christian fiction in our world. And then today, which if you're listening to this will be last week. They just released an episode called Should Christians Read Horror, which is really interesting. Ooh. And I am eager to listen to their take on that. So I just kind of love that they're talking about these specific topics and from a Christian worldview. But also they're like us. We know them personally, and they're like us, and they read widely. So it's fun to see more of that in the bookish space. So that's mine.
Yes. Kelly and Christy of that podcast were at ACFW with us, and all 4 of us were meeting in person for the first time, but we all have connections, and they're a blast. The 4 of us just have so much fun together, and they're really funny and articulate, and they really do their research. Like, I'm very impressed by their podcast, and they're like, pull out the stats and deliver it. So I totally agree. I really love a podcast called What Should I Read Next by Anne Bogle, also known as Modern Mrs. Darcy. She is incredible. She's really built a bookish empire for herself over the years. Her summer reading guide every year blows it out of the water. Her podcast is one that I like more so pop into, but I love that it's super topical because it'll be like, how do I balance my real book reading life with screen book reading time? Or what are the best books of fall? Or I don't know. Your TBR shouldn't feel like homework. I really love it. And she also has no shortage of book recommendations. I mean, she probably reads, I think she reads 200 books a year.
Oh, wow.
She's amazing. Yeah. So Anne Bogle is a really widely read, solid woman of integrity, and I really love her. So fun. Do you have any others, Hannah, or just that one?
Bookish wise, that is really the only one that I am listening to. I listen to storybooks every now and then when she does like an author that catches my eye. She does a lot of author interviews. And so whenever I see like an author that I just love or that I'm curious about, I'll pop into her episode and listen to those. And she is just a ball of fun. She's so much fun. Yeah. I loved her episode on Katherine Center. And she really dives deep into their, the aspects of their career and writing and things like that. And so I learned a lot about Katherine Center for our episode from listening to storybooks. So hers is just a fun one, and she's just bright and happy and colorful, and we're going to have her on the podcast soon, so I'm excited.
Yay, that's going to be so fun. Yeah. She'll be our first podcaster guest, right? Yeah. I think so, which is fun. We'd love to have more of those too. If you guys know any podcasters who would want to kind of collab, crossover, be a guest on ours, maybe vice versa. We'd love that. I have just one more, and it has a bad word in the title, you guys, but you can hang in there because this podcast is just that good. It's the SHIT No One Tells You About Writing. This podcast was introduced to me maybe a couple years ago, It is so enormously helpful. It's tagged as for the emerging writer, and that's such a good word for it. It's for writers who are trying, querying, learning, all of that. And it's just so good. They critique queries. It's hosted by an author and 2 dynamite agents named Carly Waters and Cece Lyra. It's just a really good podcast.
Of question boxes on social media for their episodes and just in general. And I love seeing what questions are asked and things like that. So if you have questions for them, just kind of follow their social media and pop in. And they do really well at answering them either on the podcast or on their like story boxes. So
that's and there's just invaluable info from them.
Yes.
And all right, we're going to close out.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go, because then we're going to close with one more question. But I want to hear what you were going to say.
I was just going to say it's really hard to find agents that are willing to pull back that curtain. And so I know they do a really good job of that, in my opinion. So
I couldn't agree more. They have some really good things. I share their stuff a lot, and it's just really informative. Well, we're going to close with a question that Hannah and I get a lot in our DMs in daily life. Yes. And it's really the all mystical balance question. How do you find time to focus on faith and family and then all of your writing and work and podcast stuff? How do you know when to give one more attention? Essentially, how do you balance it all? This is a common question, but never gets easier to answer. So Hannah, you go first.
I'm hiding.
She's covering her face, hiding because to be transparent, you guys, we were discussing this before and we're like, I can't believe anyone asks us this because we just ride the Hot Mess Express. It's coffee and Jesus. But we will.
My husband laughs when I tell him that people ask me this. And I just want to like get on there and scream back and be like, do you see me? But no, the biggest thing I've learned, and this is something that I struggle with because when I get in that writing mode, that's all I can think about. And I know this is the same for many writers just because the way our brains are wired. But, one thing that I have really had to do is set boundaries and set like time boundaries, especially. Every single Sunday, I tell my husband, I'm like, this is the week that I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to get stuff done before my kids wake up. That never happens. So don't feel bad if you're not the 5 a.m. girly because I am not and I probably will never be. But one thing I figured out is that I just really have to set boundaries and I have to be very conscious about what, that I am setting boundaries. Because I do homeschool my kids and they do have to have an education. So I just have to really be like, okay, I'm not focusing on books. I'm not writing unless it's podcasting day. I really give them my mornings. And Stephanie and I joked about this before we hopped on is 1 cup of coffee at a time and no sleep. Like I survive on very little sleep. But I'm rambling now. But just setting those boundaries and really learning like what can I handle, what do I need to outsource and things like that. I know lots of authors, their kids may go to school or I know that like Melissa Ferguson homeschools, but she has help come in a few days a week so she can devote hours to writing. So you really, because there is so much noise out there as to how you should be doing this career, you really just have to figure out what works for you and your life and your schedule. And that's been a big thing for me this last few months is really just blocking out all that noise of what I should be doing, how I should be going about this, how I should be getting it done. I've just had to really block out all that noise and pull myself up out of the comparison trap and just, okay, this is what works for me and my family. So totally. I'm not balancing it all.
No, I love that. The boundaries are your best friend in life, but if you were a mom working at all, you really have to be like ironclad with your boundaries and your yeses and your nos. I think it's just like so wise.
I think that with writing, especially if you're a stay-at-home mom, and you're doing this, whether you're doing it indie or you've gone traditional. I will say with indie, you have a little bit more flexibility. But I think that for me, it's been hard over the last few months and over the summer, shifting my mindset to the mindset that, okay, this is a job. Like, this is my career now. This isn't just me writing books. And I think with indie, you can put that pressure on yourself, but you can also lift it off yourself. But with traditional, it's like you signed that dotted line. You have to provide a book one way or 10 to these people. And so I think for me, getting myself into the mindset of, yes, I love to do this. Yes, this is my job and I love my job, but it is a job and I have to treat it like I have to figure out a way to incorporate it, and my kids we have to make some adjustments, to figure out, okay, I've got to devote time to this. You get what I'm saying.
Totally. Absolutely. Yes.
It's a shift that happens when you sign that contract.
It is. And I think something that I love about this podcast is all of the older, wiser women that we have had the privilege of speaking with. Yes. And Patty Callahan Henry said it a bit on her podcast, right at a time when I was kind of shifting. I didn't know or had I already signed with Danielle? Things were about to ramp up for me in the traditional way. And she said, you know what? In your career, you're going to have to say no to things. You're not always going to be able to go to the daytime tennis, the daytime this, you do have a job. So I think that for all of you guys listening, and it's your dream to have the agent and the contract, yes, it is a dream come true. It is also a job with responsibilities, and that requires certain no's. And it's the best job in the world. And you have, at the end of the day, flexibility, which is such a gift. Yeah. You're not in an office from 9 to 5, but it's hard. So thank you, Patty, for that nugget. I also, both of these things go with boundaries, but for me, I literally wrote down seasons and time blocking. We talked a little bit about time blocking with Shannon Lyko of Paring Down. And that for me, I've always done it. Well, I've done it for 10 years, I guess, since I've been a mom.
Without even realizing it, probably.
Yeah, in my schedule, even when I had babies at home, I recently found my writing weekly schedule for when I was writing When We Blinked, when I had a 1, 4, and 6-year-old.
Yes.
And I would just time block. It was I wrote from 5 to 6 in the morning. I wrote during nap time, and I would write 1 hour before bed. That's how I got it done. Yeah. And I protected that time with all that I had. So time blocking in my written calendar or your iCal. And now it's very different and very wonderful because I have 3 kids in school. It's magical and bittersweet and all the things. But I have pretty much Monday through Friday, 8 to 2:30.
Yes.
Open. But that can be a blessing and a curse because you're I got the whole day. So within that time block. I do. Yes. I'm working out from this time to this time. I am free to get lunch with this friend in town from 11 to 12:30. And then I am working from 12:30 to drop off. And I have to put podcast stuff in there. And for me, it's really important. I do the best I can to pick my girls up at 3:00, and I am mommy until 8, because the older they get, they don't like me on my phone. They don't like me multitasking. They want and deserve my attention. So I try really, really hard because I'm finally in that season. I wasn't always, you guys. I get it all done before I am mommy, and I love that. The other thing I wrote seasons because I love that saying forever that women can do it all, but they can't do it all at the same level at the same time. It's just not humanly possible. So never look at me or Hannah or anyone else thinking we're doing it all to the max, because people are how do you People are how do you write books and run marathons and have 3 girls? I'm listen, look at a year. A marathon cycle is 16 weeks. It's not 52. So I might run a marathon and train for that for 16 weeks. And then for the next 4 months, I'm writing a book. And the next, you cannot, I really look at even my years like that. Yes. So I'm and right now I'm in a waiting pocket because I'm about to go on submission. I'm not writing a book and I got really, really sick. So I'm also not training for a marathon. So I don't even try to do it all at the same time. Yeah. So I know sometimes social media for all of us can create that illusion that we are crushing all of the goals at the same time, but no one is. No. Seasons are there's 4 in a year, but you can create as many as you want in a year.
Yeah.
And I've learned, I feel like you're learning it earlier than I did, Hannah, just the power of your no and your yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
way to be
and that's one thing that
aware of boundaries.
Yeah. That's one thing I was going to say is, like, especially when you're thrust into the traditional world, and after ACFW, there was just a lot of energy and I was excited and motivated and things like that. And I've gotten invited to multiple conferences in the spring. And when I sat down to really figure out my 2025, I had to say a lot of hard no's. And one of those conferences, my sweet agent was going to be at, and I was going to be able to meet her and all that, but it just was not in the budget, and it was not in by the way, guys, you don't get magically rich when you become an author. And
you're paying for your own plane ticket.
Yes, it just wasn't in the cards to work out, and so I had to say a lot of hard no's. And that can be hard when you're a yes person, but also just like you said, guarding that time. And for me, there's only so many weekends or days a year out of the year that I want to be away from my kids. So just figuring that out. And so, but like you said, don't ever look at social media and think that I've got it all together, because I have not read a full book in probably 3 or 4 months, and I'm supposed to be a bookstagrammer. And just it happens.
Okay. Yeah, it happens. Life happens. Writing happens.
It does.
Yeah, and I remember, just last little anecdote, I was probably your age, Hannah. I was your age 10 years ago, and I was probably
yeah, my daughter told me yesterday, she was like, I want to watch a movie from the olden days. And I was like, what are you? So I was thinking like Westerns. So I turned on Zorro, and she was like, I meant like a Disney Channel movie from your time. And I was like, I am 20 years older than you, child. Like, no, ma'am.
So funny. I know. I love to throw out the 1900s. I was telling my girls about chalkboards and chalk. They're like, in the classroom? What? Yeah. I know. So I was at a Christmas event at my church, and this amazing author who I was a big fan of, I still am, I love her. Her name is Rebecca Lyons. She writes nonfiction Christian, and she just has the best heart. She has a son with Down syndrome. She has 3 kids. She struggles with anxiety and panic attacks, but has a huge story of healing. So I read her book Free Fall to Fly when I was in that postpartum, like I had my own anxiety, like that book, Free Fall to Fly. If anyone needs a book about anxiety and panic attacks, whoa. So I loved her, and I know, right? I heard her speak. And then after I waited in line to meet her, and I literally was at the time mom blogging, wanted to someday write a book, which I wouldn't do until I was 34. But I was like, how do you do it? Like, how do you find time to write with 3 kids and blah, 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 blah. And at the time, she was 10 years older than me. And she literally, her answer was, girl, I got 3 kids in school all day. And I was like, oh. She's like, I literally write when they're at school. And that for me was like, that day will come. So that day, if you have babies at home, I know a lot of you guys do who listen, it's okay to fit it into the pockets right now. And later that day will come. Life is so long. So
and
anyway,
I was thinking the other day, I asked somebody, I was like, I told my husband, I was like, I don't even remember when I wrote the book that I got my agent with. And he was like, you didn't sleep. You wrote it and you were nursing a baby. He was like, you wrote it when you were sitting in the rocking chair, and you wrote it when the kids were asleep, and they napped then. My kids napped then. They don't nap anymore. And we do homeschool. And so I know a lot of people ask, like, how do you do it with homeschooling? And they're older, a little bit older now. So my kids are 5 and 7. And so since they are a little older, like in the afternoons, once we get school done, they will play by themselves. And so that's like 30 minutes to an hour. And you can get a lot done in 30 minutes if you really. But every afternoon, my little girl has gymnastics for an hour and a half. And I told my husband when she started that, I was like, that is my guarded time. I kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I take her to gymnastics. I put in my headphones. All the parents of gymnastics know what I do. And so they don't talk to me. And they know if they have her headphones in, she's working. And so I watch her, but I'm also have an hour and a half where I can get podcasts done, and that's literally my work day.
Mm-hmm.
And then nights, like I said. But so just like you said, you can't do it all. God didn't design us to do it all. So just really every season looks different. I'm feel sure when I write my next book, it'll be a completely different schedule than writing this book. So just rest assured, I only have 4 panic attacks a day.
Only 4, maybe 5. Oh my goodness. Well, this was so much fun, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you guys for your questions. I know we went over a little bit, but
at the beginning of this episode, we were like, we'll do like 30 minutes max, but an hour later,
we went double.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. Well, let us know what you guys think of this. Do you guys like these Q&A episodes? We really like to just pop on just us two, even though we love our guests also. Let us know what you think. And we know this was a Q&A episode, but we're always open anytime. We're an open book, open DMs. So we're here for your questions and to support you guys. So thank you for listening. We will have another episode next week with a fabulous guest. So stay tuned for that. And as always, thank you for listening. Drop us a review, comment on social media. We love you all. Bye, besties.